We are solving question number 6 and we have so far done all of the working notes, that is notes to the balance sheet. Different schedules of assets and liabilities are done except for a few where we require some calculations related to the reserves. For reserves, we did the calculation on cash reserve and the liquid reserve, and we have these amounts. Now what we need to see is whether the cash reserve which is required, this is as per RBI's requirement, they have to keep aside 3%, and we've calculated the amounts. So is this cash reserve which is required equal to the cash reserve that has been already maintained with RBI? We need to match the two. All right, the actual versus the expected. So the expected reserves are these that have been made mandatory by RBI, and we have to check how much in the problem has been already maintained as a reserve. So here you have, this is the problem. Here you have been given that cash with RBI is 37.88. Now let's look at what was the requirement. I'll keep this here, cash with RBI 37.88, and the requirement that we have calculated of the cash reserve is 44.61. So if you see here, 44.61 is the cash reserve, right? Now, what to do with the difference and how to make up for that difference? All right, first let's find out how much that difference is. So an additional working note over here we will do, and I will say cash reserve required for current year. Okay, this is actually 44.61. We've calculated in the previous thing, right? So 44.61 is required, and from this you deduct the cash reserve which has already been maintained. So how much have you kept with RBI? Cash balance with RBI is 37.88. So 37.88. Done. Underline this, and what you get is the balance amount that still needs to be transferred to the cash reserve. All right, the whole logic is the actual requirement is 44.61 that is supposed to put in the cash reserve, but so far you have only put the cash balance of 37.88 that is kept aside. So how much more additional do you need to transfer? Additional transfer needed to maintain cash reserve. How much more is required? Balance is 6.73. So another 6.73 needs to come back to your balance with RBI. Now where to get this balance from? All right. Now there is some amount which the bank has maintained with other banks, isn't it? There is cash kept with other banks, which is rupees 155.87. I got it from here, cash with other banks 155.87. So what do we need to do is, this additional transfer which is required for our cash reserve, we need to get it from this other banks, or the amount that we have kept with other banks. Okay, so let's transfer to balance with RBI. So we are going to transfer this amount. How much do we require? How much more do we need to be transferred to RBI? 6.73, isn't it? So deduct that from the cash with other banks, and what you get is the total, the balance amount that you can transfer to the other banks, or that will remain with the other banks, is 149.14. This is the balance amount. Okay, so what we have done is we checked how much was needed for the cash reserve this year. It's 44.61, and we saw how much has already been maintained with RBI. They maintained only 37, meaning they were falling short of 6.73. Where to get this from? there is some amount already kept with other banks. So deduct the required amount from the other banks, meaning bring back the money from other banks and keep it with RBI. So what remains with the other banks, the balance is 149.14. Right? Very simple calculation. Okay, so since the amount kept with RBI was less than the actual cash reserve that is required, we have taken an additional transfer of 6.73. All right, so now let's add this up or write it in the actual places. So total cash balance with RBI, that is going to be shown in the balance sheet, that will be the current year's or cash reserve that is required. Okay, so I will put it here. Cash balances are in schedule 6, balances with RBI. Now you can directly put 144, but just to show the calculation, I will write here how much is cash with RBI or balances with RBI. It is 37.88. To this I will add additional transfer, which is 6 point, must we calculate, balance is 6.73, right? Yes, so 6.73. Total you get of these balances outside is 44.61. All right, so the final balance, the actual balance that needs to be maintained with RBI is 44.61. If you total this up, you get 204.76. 204.76. Done. Okay, now also take care of the balances with other banks. According to our calculation that we have done, balances with other banks come to 149.14. Get the new figure after deducting the additional transfer. Okay, so 149.14, and the total of balances with other banks is 359.26. Done. Okay, let's just take a look now. If we have all our schedules right from schedule 1, 2, 3 total, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Other assets, we don't have any, nothing is given in other assets, so this will be nil, and this is 12. So all the schedules are ready to go into the balance sheet. We said there was one transaction, one adjustment there, which just spoke of how much is government securities and how much of cash credit is secured or unsecured. So just as a note, we will mention this over here. Okay, other information about overdraft and all, nothing is mentioned. So this note, we will just write it here. Okay, just as an additional information, telling you about how much of it is secured, unsecured, and so on. We're not going to bifurcate it because they have not given it much. Another way to do it would be to calculate how much is 50% of this and show 50% as secured, the remaining is unsecured. But we don't know whether the remaining is really unsecured or again it has been secured by some other guarantee, right? So at this point I will just make a note here and write the additional information. Alright, so time to transfer all the scheduled totals to the final balance sheet. Let's do it one by one. Outline is ready. Capital 198, just posting now from one to another. I will write the decimals as well. 198.0. Then reserves and surplus, we keep going from one to another. 793.00, of course. Then 1487, their deposits 0.12. Next, borrowings is 110. Other liabilities and provisions is 0.10, your last one. And if you total up all these, the total of all the capital and liabilities comes to 2588.22. All right, done. Next, what about assets? Starting with schedule 6, 204.76, schedule 7, 359.26. Then investments 165.40, and advances 1632.98. Okay, fixed assets is 225.82. Other assets is nil. Okay, contingent liabilities will come later. Total again of the asset side, of course you can do it yourself and cross check. It also comes to 2588.22. Okay, and contingent liabilities, okay, I've written this in the wrong column. Bills for collection is 18.10 as given in the problem. Okay, and contingent liabilities comes to 14.67 as we have calculated here. So that's our balance sheet. Okay, along with all the notes to the balance sheet. You just run through it once. This is what you've got. A complete balance sheet right up to here. And of course we have the notes to the balance sheet. So this is problem number 6. I've done it in a separate file. Okay, and these are all the working notes to the balance sheet.